streets are crowded tonight. One more bullet found its way, one more life gone today. How do we change the ending of this story? What can we do to make it out? Let justice reign. Let it pour on this dry ground. Let mercy run. Let it flow where hurt is found. Like a river through the streets, like a flood with waters deep. Right through our hearts, straight through our hearts. Let it rain, let it rain, let it rain, let it rain. This town's gone mad tonight. My heart feels bad tonight. The words they fly back and forth, head down, defend your turf. We all want to stay alive, just trying to get back home again. But how can we possibly survive? Let justice reign. Let it pour on this dry ground. Let mercy run. Let it flow where hurt is found. Like a river through the streets, like a flood with waters deep. Right through our hearts, straight through our hearts. Let it rain, let it rain, let it rain, let it rain. Not one more. Enough is enough. Say their names. Enough is enough. Not one more. Enough is enough. Say their names. Enough is enough. Not one more. Enough is enough. Say their names. Say their names. Enough is enough. Yeah. Let justice reign. Oh, let justice reign. Let it pour on this dry ground. Let mercy run. Oh yeah. Let it flow where hurt is found. Like a river through the streets, like a flood with waters deep. Right through our hearts, straight through our hearts. Let it rain, let it rain, let it rain, let it rain. Oh, let it rain, let it rain. Woo, let it rain, let it rain, let it rain, let it rain. Let it rain, let it rain. Ooh, let justice reign. Ooh, let justice reign. Let it rain.
Good morning, everyone. And good morning, Jimmie. I'm so excited to join you as co-host for the 2022 EAD Virtual Gathering and Lobby Day.
Hello, Maggie. We are going to have a great time working together as an ecumenical team from the Christian faith, including both Catholic and Protestant denominations, and over 50 organizations who advocate for civil rights domestically and human rights globally every single day.
Our theme this week is fierce urgency. advancing civil and human rights, and will encompass a domestic focus on voting rights and offer perspective on the impact that U.S. arms sales have on human rights internationally.
This morning, you are able to visit our 2022 Expo and meet with exhibitors and sponsoring organizations for EAD. We encourage you to schedule one-on-one video visits with them throughout the conference and visit their displays 24/7 to learn more about what they do. There are over 40 sessions covering topics ranging from skills building for new advocates, environmental justice, global peace and security, economic justice, domestic issues, and specific concerns from the Middle East, Africa, Latin America, and Asia Pacific regions. Be sure to add these to your schedule using the bookmark feature on the agenda tab. Again, the bookmark feature on the agenda tab. And there can be up to 8 sessions per hour. So make sure you use the arrow to scroll right at each time slot to see all the options before making your selections.
Whew! Jimmie, there is so much in store. We'd better get started. We begin today with our opening worship, followed by denominational meetings from 12 to 2, skill workshops from 2 to 4, and then we come together again at 4 o'clock for our opening plenary with Dr. Barbara Williams Skinner. We invite you to join us now for our opening worship with a message of hope delivered by Reverend Dr. Otis Moss III, Senior Pastor of Trinity United Church of Christ in Chicago, Illinois. And be sure to check out where you can find your denominational time, as you'll be reporting directly to that after worship.
Welcome to worship for 2022's Ecumenical Advocacy Days. As people of faith, we know that each person is created in God's image and imbued with dignity, having a voice that demands to be heard, heeded, and treated justly. These are times of fierce urgency for civil and human rights. We hope this worship can be a time of grounding, reflection, and inspiration for our work together during the course of this conference. Now, let's join together in worship to love God and neighbor.
Blessings and peace to you, siblings in Christ. Please join me in our opening prayer. Let us pray. Holy and righteous God, you created us in your image. Grant us grace to contend fearlessly against evil and to make no peace with oppression. Help us, like generations before us, who resisted the evils of slavery and human bondage in any form. Free us from a false sense of security proclaimed by the idols of greed, war, and domination. Help us to raise our voices to bring justice among people and nations everywhere, to the glory of your holy name, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Frank Foolscrow, a Lakota medicine man, was born in 1891 in Kyle, South Dakota, near Porcupine Creek on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation in South Dakota on either June 24th or 27th between 1890 and 1892. He died November 27th, 1989. He was a greatly respected Oglala Lakota civic and religious leader, often called Grandfather or Grandpa Frank, and was a nephew of Black Elk. He gave the opening prayer in Lakota to the United States Senate in Washington, D.C. on September 5th, 1975, to discuss the 1868 treaty, sovereignty, and the continuing violence and civil rights violations. In the presence of this house, Grandfather Wakantanka, and from the directions where the sun sets, and from the direction of the cleansing power, and from the direction of the rising sun, and from the direction of the middle of the day. Grandfather, Wakantanka, and grandmother, the earth who hears everything, I come to you this day. Give us a blessing so that our words and actions may be one in unity, and that we be able to listen to one another. In so doing, we shall with good heart walk hand in hand to face the future. In the presence of the outside, we are thankful for many blessings. I make my prayer for all people, the children, the women, and the men. I pray that no harm will come to them, and on the great island, there will be no war, that there will be no ill feelings among us. From this day on, may we walk hand in hand. So be it.
We will make no peace, no peace, no peace with oppression. We will make no peace, no peace. We will make no peace, no peace, no peace with oppression. We will make no peace, no peace. Those who live by the sword will die by the sword. We will stand against violence of every form. We will march in the streets, no justice, no peace. Arm in arm with our neighbor till we all stand free. Almighty God, help us not to be afraid. Almighty God, give us your strength. We will make no peace, no peace, no peace with oppression. We will make
A reading from the Gospel according to St. Luke. Now, as Jesus was approaching the slope of the Mount of Olives, the whole multitude of his disciples began to praise God aloud with joy for all the mighty deeds they had seen. They proclaimed, "Blessed is the King who comes in the name of the Lord. Peace in heaven and glory in the highest." Some of the Pharisees in the crowd said to him, "Teacher, rebuke your disciples." He said in reply, "I tell you, if they keep silent, the stones will cry out." As he drew near, he saw the city and wept over it, saying, "If this day you only knew what makes for peace, but now it is hidden from your eyes." The Gospel of the Lord.
A reading from Paul's letter to the Romans, chapter 13, verses 8 through 12. Owe nothing to anyone, except for your obligation to love one another. If you love your neighbor, you will fulfill the requirements of God's law. For the commandments say, you must not commit adultery, you must not murder, you must not steal, you must not covet. These and other such commandments are summed up in this one commandment. Love your neighbor as yourself. Love does no wrong to others, so love fulfills the requirements of God's law. Loving as God does is all the more urgent, for you know how late it is. Time is running out. Wake up, for our salvation is nearer now than when we first believed. The night is almost gone. The day of salvation will soon be here. So remove your dark deeds like dirty clothes and put on the shining armor of right living.
With civil rights in his DNA, senior pastor of Trinity United Church of Christ in Chicago, Reverend Dr. Otis Moss III is a preacher, activist, and author. Over the last 2 decades, Dr. Moss has practiced and preached a Black theology that unapologetically calls attention to the problems of mass incarceration, environmental justice, and economic inequality. Dr. Moss is a part of a new generation of ministers committed to preaching a prophetic message of love and justice. He was recently recognized for one of the 12 most effective preachers in the English-speaking world by Baylor University's George W. Truett Theological Seminary. The work and legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and the pastoral ministry of his father, Reverend Dr. Otis Moss Jr. of Cleveland, Ohio, have been primary mentors for his spiritual formation. He is an ordained minister in both the Progressive National Baptist Convention and the United Church of Christ. Thank you, Dr. Moss, for giving us a word that speaks to the fierce urgency for civil and human rights today.
To my UCC brothers and sisters, I thank you for allowing me to have this opportunity to present a little homily as we speak about our advocacy and the days that we are called to advocate for those who have been marginalized, to this ever-widening community of incredible human beings who deeply love our God and serve Christ. It is a privilege to be with you virtually at this moment. If we could, at this moment, if we could just have a word of prayer, let us go to God at this time. Search me, O God, and know my heart. And try me and see if there is any destructive way in me. When you discover what does not belong, take it from me. Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in thy sight. O Lord, you are my strength, and without a doubt, you are my Redeemer. Holy Spirit, do thy will this day. In the mighty, wonderful, powerful, liberating, salvific, holy, healing name, we offer this prayer in Jesus' name. And those who love God may say, amen. I'd like to lift up a passage of Scripture, I believe is already read, but lift it up once again from a different vantage point, coming from Luke, the 19th chapter. This triumphal entry that is often used during Palm Sunday, we lift up beginning where it reads in verse 28. After Jesus had said this, he went on ahead going up to Jerusalem. As he had approached Bethphage and Bethany at the hill called the Mount of Olives, he sent two of his disciples, saying to them, go to the village ahead of you and enter it, and you will find a colt tied there, which no one has ever ridden. Untie it and bring it here. If anyone asks you, why are you untying it? Tell him the Lord needs it. Those who were sent ahead went and found it just as he had told them. As they were untying the colt, its owners asked them, why are you untying the colt? They replied, the Lord needs it. They brought it to Jesus, threw their cloaks on the colt, and put Jesus on it, and he went along. People spread their cloaks on the road. When he came near to the place where the road goes down the Mount of Olives, the whole crowd of disciples began joyfully to praise God in loud voices and for all the miracles they had seen. Untie the colt and bring it here. Untie the colt and bring it here. May the Lord add a blessing to the reading and hearing of God's holy word. I'd like to place a tag here at this moment, and for us, for the brief time that we have, for us to deal with just a simple idea of it's time to untie the colt. One of the controversial statements that is offered today in some theological circles is the idea that Jesus is a liberator. Now, for those within the United Church of Christ, that may not seem as radical. Across the expanse of Americanized Christianity, to say Jesus is a liberator causes committees to gather together in the South and study groups to begin to tweet in the West, and for people to write papers in the East and in the North about what is meant by Jesus being a liberator. There's one friend who comes from the evangelical framework of westernized Christianity. He said, you mentioned that Jesus is a liberator. Jesus is a savior. And I responded to say, I didn't say that he was not. I said Jesus is a liberator. This is interesting that there are so many within our tradition and traditions that to think of Jesus as a liberator is now for some code for some destructive, subversive, socialist, Antifa, BLM language. And I would say that that is actually a badge of honor. Framing Jesus within the category of liberator causes such consternation that seminary presidents in the South have to gather together and say that we protest the use of that term. But as one who does not come solely out of the Western framework of Christianity, but one who is within the Black tradition, the Black church tradition, specifically what is known as Black religiosity and spirituality, one cannot divorce salvation from liberation. For it is only a partial gospel and very Americanized version of the gospel if Jesus simply is a personal Savior. Because as long as Jesus is a personal Savior, then there is no requirement for us to do public work. Now, I would not in any way say that Jesus is not personal, but when one collectively looks at the gospel, it is not from that framework that Jesus does Jesus' work. Jesus nowhere in the gospel is saying that I've come to be your personal Savior. This very Americanized idea. Nothing wrong with it in its frame or on its shelf. But to divorce the idea of liberation, this collective community engagement, is problematic to the gospel. Because in these days, in these moments in America, we need a church that is unrepentant about saying that Jesus is not only Savior, but Jesus is liberator. Jesus is healer. Jesus is barrier breaker. Jesus is one who lifts up and also tears down human walls that have been created to keep us from connecting with the full humanity and spirit by which we have been designed. I come, as I mentioned, from that Black church tradition where we inherently saw Jesus as a liberator. And when one comes from this framework, from a cultural and also exegetical perspective, it changes the reading when you look at the gospel. Jesus is a liberator. What does this mean to liberate? It means that when one is chained, they are set free. What does this mean to be liberated? It means that when one is labeled and marginalized, that all of a sudden they are brought into the light. What does it mean? It means that someone else does not define who you are, but you are a child of God. For Scripture says that God knew you before you were formed in your mother's womb. Jesus is a liberator. And so if Jesus is a liberator, it then demands and states for us that we must recognize as the people of God that the church collectively must be a liberating church. A liberating church, a loving church, a church that breaks down walls, but a church that is unafraid to face the bruises that we inflict upon each other and upon our world, where we do not jettison our spirituality just simply to offer a prescription of policy, but they are all together, the sacred and the secular mixed together. Jesus is a liberator. And I would challenge us as we examine this particular scripture, that with that idea theologically in mind, that we will see Scripture in a different framework when we know that Jesus is a liberator, a Scripture that we have looked at many times before, especially during the season that we know as Lent, specifically on Palm Sunday. The triumphant entry, this triumphal entry of Jesus going into Jerusalem as people are shouting for this revolutionary rabbi by the name of Jesus, who lives in occupied territory, where the shadow of Roman power is upon his brow, and the powerful love of God is upon his heart. Where those who have some degree of local power, the church folks and the lawyers and tax collectors, are worried about this person by the name of Jesus. But I've always loved this text, and I believe that we have often talked around some other aspects of liberation that are inherent within this text. Jesus has already left Bethphage and Bethany and is on his way in to Jerusalem, and he makes a direction, gives a direction to those disciples. He says, brothers, this is what I need y'all to do. I want you to go into the community, and I want you to find a colt, a young donkey, one that has not been ridden. I want you to untie it, and I want you to bring it to me. The text speaks of Jesus talking to his disciples, instructing them to find a colt unridden, to find a colt, a colonized colt, a disenfranchised donkey, and bring him to me. For the colt, a baby donkey, was conditioned to be in service for someone else. The colt was born into the world on the outskirts of our imagination, just simply born into this world to service someone else. And based upon the family history, was not destined for greatness. It was doomed to be a beast of burden. This is a colt. This colt will not grow up to be a horse, but it will grow up to be a donkey. Your role, your job, your place in the whole hierarchy that we have created, in the system that we have designed, it is designed specifically that you are to serve and that you are to carry the load. And Jesus orders his disciples, I want you to go and find a donkey that has been domesticated, that has been colonized, a donkey that has been colonized, a disenfranchised donkey, a colonized colt, a colt who was birthed into oppression for colonization, and simply means that he lived a life based on how other people defined him. Jesus wanted a colonized colt. This was a colonized colt. It was colonized for the fact that it had to carry someone else's burden. It was colonized so that it could be used to empower and to enrich someone else. It was colonized. It was given a story by someone else, saying that this is how high you can attain. You are simply a colt. You are simply a donkey. You are disenfranchised. So stay in your place, colt. Do not ask for any type of rights. Do not organize. Just stay in your place. Things will work out if you just stay in your place. Nobody thought this colt had much worth, but Jesus wanted this colonized colt as his main mode of transportation. Isn't it interesting that Jesus has interest in what everybody else has already dismissed? That I want the colt that has been colonized. I want the disenfranchised donkey. I want what you have already assumed is only to be used in one way. And I'm about to transform what you think about the colt, what you think about the donkey. You think I should ride a horse, but I'm not Caesar. I am Christ. And I'm looking for a colt. I'm looking for a donkey. Untie this colt, this colonized colt tied to a post. The colt had restricted movement. Look at this now. Jesus is about to liberate a colt. The colt was tied to a post. He was tied, not necessarily in chains, but was tied down. In other words, the colt had limited ability to be able to see the fullness of the cult's experience. Because the colt was tied to the post, because the one who tied the colt to the post did not want the colt to run away, and did not want the colt to see the fullness of what was around. Because if he was untied, he might see a different sky. If he was untied, he might see a different landscape. If he is untied. And Jesus sends the disciples to go untie someone who had been tied up. Tied up by a particular definition of what the colt can do, tied up by a particular perspective and framework and system that says that you must stay in this place. If we begin to look at how America functions on so many levels, that it's always tying up either groups of people or ideas and limits them in terms of what they can and or should not or should do. And here's Jesus. He does not go himself. He sends some brothers to say, I want you to go and untie this particular colt. Somebody wanted to maintain control of the colt. Somebody wanted to keep the colt in the colt's place. Somebody wanted to use the colt for profit. Somebody wanted the colt to expand their capitalist interests. But Jesus sends these brothers to go untie this colt. And if this colt is untied, it changes the life of the colt. Because no longer is the colt tied up with a limited look. The colt is now set free. But the people who set free of the colt are sent by Jesus. Jesus does not go himself. In other words, those who represent the church are given an assignment to untie what has been tied up. An assignment the church has been given during these days, and that it is part of our specific assignment to find out those places in which people and systems are tying people up, and how do we untie so that those who have been locked down and disenfranchised can blossom and exist to their full God-given potential. And Jesus tells these disciples, I want you to untie the colt, but I want the colonized colt, the one that's been tied up in the same place, in the same position, for someone else's pleasure. And some people want to make sure that certain individuals stay tied up. I'm always fascinated by those who get so upset this day and age about particular things. I had a conversation with someone who was talking about critical race theory. They were not critical, didn't know anything about race, had no theory, but they were so very, very fearful that if certain things were taught in school, that it would be so destructive to children. And I simply retorted and said, you mean things like history? That they might be set free and not tied up anymore, that they might start a revolution. All of these young colts in elementary school might suddenly rise up and realize the commonality, the flaws of our democracy, and they might decide that they want to engage and rebuild these yet to be United States of America so that all can participate in this space of an American project of democracy. I don't know. I'm not fearful of it. I'm glad that we are engaging it, that we need people who are willing to untie the colt, who have been tied for so long. You were tied up because there are those who deeply fear that you might get free. Because if you are free, you might hear the words of Sojourner Truth say, ain't I a woman? If you are free, you might learn about the legacy and the blessing of a Bayard Rustin. If you get free, you might read the words of Toni Morris. And if you get free, you might actually read the Bible. And what you do to the least of these, you also do to me. If you are untied. How are we tied up in so many levels and in so many ways? Tied up with peculiar doctrines and tied up, especially the church. It is fascinating to me. The church is so tied up stuck on a post. There's only certain things that we can do. There's only certain music that can be played in the church. We're tied up. There are certain things that can be said and cannot be said in church. We are tied up. There are certain things that you can only wear this. You cannot wear this. We are so tied up. Here is Jesus sending his disciples to say, untie this colt. This colt is untied. There just might be a revolution. A colt revolution or a stampede. Because no longer will that colt be framed by the desires and the exploitation of the one who thought he was the owner of the colt. But not only that, is that Jesus says, I want a colt that nobody's ridden. And this is a word for the church. I want an unridden colt. In other words, I don't want a domesticated donkey. I want an unridden colt. For a domesticated donkey already has been placed within a position where that donkey believes that there are certain things I can do or I cannot do, that it's not possible to make change, that I must stay in my place because they have been domesticated in certain ways. And that is the word for the church, because in many ways, some of us, and even in our congregations, and as preachers, have become domesticated donkeys. We have been serving in position so long, spouting the same rhetoric over and over again, that we don't even believe that we can make transformation within our own communities or even in this nation. It is the challenge of the church to break the domestication, the colonization. And it is the challenge of the church that we have to build the relationships for those who have not been domesticated. In other words, another generation that does not have the limits and blinders that we have to say what the church can and cannot do. We are so limited, but there is a generation, just like in the text, an unridden colt. In other words, a younger donkey, one that has not been domesticated. One that has not been broken by society, that still has the ability to grow and change and see the world radically. We need to build that kind of relationship so for the church to be able to thrive in this season and not be limited upon the domestication and our donkey-esque focus of what liberation can and cannot be. Jesus says, bring me the one no one's ridden. I don't want the one that believes that there's only one way to function. There's only one way to live. There's only one thing that can happen. Only one way it can happen. I need the unridden donkey. Jesus wants an unridden colt, not a domesticated donkey. Even though the colt was colonized, he was not yet poisoned by the process of domestication. He was unridden. He was young, too young to believe. He still believed in possibility. He still believed that he could protest and change democracy. He still believed that a new world was possible. He still had a hope in his spirit. And part of the responsibility of the church is to ensure that we do not poison the next generation with our doctrine of domestication. We do not domesticate their dreams in such a way to say that there is a ceiling upon them, that we must allow them to thrive if we are to alter things in this world and in this nation. We must see the liberation framework of Jesus, demanding that we untie the colt, demanding that we untie another generation, demanding that we go into spaces where people have been locked up and locked down, and we are willing to be on the front line. Untie the colt. Liberation will flow. This colonized colt, this disenfranchised donkey. Jesus did not want the domesticated donkey, but a wild, untamed donkey, one that doesn't follow all of the rules, doesn't know the liturgy, can't sing all the songs, isn't quite sure about the fashion for Sunday, one that raises questions. Why do you do it? What is the purpose behind it? Explain it to me. I need some energy like that. And that is what the church is lacking, because we are always trying to place a lid and domesticate the geniuses within our community who are not from our generation. See, domesticated donkeys put limits on God. Domesticated churches put limits on the Holy Spirit. Domesticated church folk are dangerous because they are the ones who will always intervene to keep people from doing the work of liberation. I must share the story with you, and I must also bid you a good day. But there's a story. We have what is known as the drug and alcohol recovery ministry here at Trinity United Church of Christ. It is one of the most amazing revivals I've ever been in. It's not because of a preacher or because of the music. It is because that we bring into the sanctuary different programs from around Chicago, and people who are addicts, are struggling, are in this worship experience. And what is so beautiful about this is there's nobody who's really domesticated. Because some have been in worship spaces, some have not. They're not quite sure of the particular protocol, but there's something that is so powerful when they come together, when they share their stories. And they talk about what they have been through and the injuries that they have caused and the injuries that they have witnessed and received. There's something uplifting when they do something called the count, where they go down the line of how many people are sober for 25 years, 24 years, and on, and people stand up and they clap and they cheer. But that's not the moving part. It's when they get down to not 1 year, but when they get down to how many people have been sober for 1 week, but it's when they get down to how many people have been sober for 24 hours. And when those people stand up, the entire church erupts. And you see tears falling from people's eyes and people running to that individual and hugging them and saying, just keep coming back. That I'm standing with you. I'm praying for you. And immediately following that, you have people coming to the altar saying that I want a major shift in my life. When the ministry started, there were those who didn't believe that this was the appropriate place to have that kind of worship. They had a domesticated mindset. But now it is an annual event and has been an annual event for many years at this church. Because the pastor, my predecessor, Dr. Wright, was told by God, make sure you make space. Make space for those who have been tied up. And that is our call, to make space for those who have been tied up. And so these individuals were sent to go and tie this donkey, and the donkey was brought to Jesus. And Jesus climbed on top of the donkey. They put a cloak up there, and he comes into Jerusalem. And people are shouting, there is Jesus. But please understand this. That we celebrate the disciples and we celebrate all of those who are part of this particular story. But the one who lifted Jesus up higher than Peter ever lifted Jesus, higher than Luke ever lifted Jesus, higher than Mathew lifted Jesus, was this unwritten colt, was this disenfranchised donkey, now has a part of history and brings Jesus into Jerusalem. I want you to understand, beloved, that the role and the call of the church is to be a liberator, is to share the message of Jesus. But Jesus is telling us too, we have to find those who have been tied up, We have to discover those who've been disenfranchised and who've been marginalized. Part of the role of the church is to release and liberate those at the direction of our liberator, Jesus. We're called to untie those who've been tied up because they could not participate in this democracy or this yet to be democracy. What shall you do this season? Shall you be a domesticated church, or will you be a liberating space where you are unafraid to untie the colt and set free the disenfranchised and bless those who have been broken and stand as an ally and an accomplice with those who have been bruised? In this day, at this moment, this is what our world needs. People who are unafraid to untie some things so they can be set free.
In his sermon, Beyond Vietnam at Riverside Church in 1967, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. challenged his listeners to have difficult conversations with each other about policy, to see the connection between civil rights in the United States and human rights around the world, and to be inspired by the living God to speak up for both peace and justice. He said, and I quote, "This I believe to be the privilege and the burden of all of us who deem ourselves bound by allegiances and loyalties which are broader and deeper than nationalism, and which go beyond our nation's self-defined goals and positions. We are called to speak for the weak, for the voiceless, for the victims of our nation, and for those it calls enemy," unquote. His words resonate with challenges today, calling us together as people of faith to speak up. We join together as one body of Christ now, praying in many voices, languages, congregations, and traditions, but united in our faith and in our advocacy.
Creator God, you have made us to be one human people, creating each person in your divine image and gifting us each with full inherent measures of dignity. Guide your church into unity, that together we might stand with those whose dignity is denied and whose voices are silenced. Oh God, fill us with urgency to seek your justice and true peace.
Dios maravilloso, tú has creado muchos pueblos porque amas la riqueza que obra en la diversidad. Abre los corazones de los líderes en todas partes para que puedan maravillarse con la belleza de tus muchas voces, buscando equidad desde el coro de nuestro mundo, floreciendo así para todas y todos sus miembros. Oh Dios, llénanos de un sentido de urgencia para buscar tu justicia y la paz verdadera.
Nkulunkulu thwalala phakathe wena loniketa bantfu likhaya lekuphumula uyinqaba yekuphephela ufuna ukuthi sinikele ngalokuphelele timphilo tethu ekunakekelweni nguwe kuqula tinhlitiyo letilije utende tibe imitfombo yeluvelo netandla letivalekile kutsi tivulekele kwemukela nekumnakekela labanye sifundzise Nkosi kwephana ngaloko lesiphiwa kona nekutsi sati kutsi konke lesinako kuvela kuwe nekutsi usinika kona kuze kutsi site ukhona kusita labanye. Nkulunkulu sende kutsi sifune bulungiswa lobuvela kuwe nekuthula sibili.
وارشدنا دائما في طريق السلام والمصالحة والخير العام.
Բարերար Աստված, բարի լուրը տարածողները հավաքած ես, եւ պայքարող խոժար եղողներալ, ընդեմ բռնակալության եւ անարդարության գործիքներու, ինչպես նաեւ նյութական չարաշահման կառույցներու, ցեղամոլության, աշխարհադիրության, պատերազմի եւ վայրակության թեմ։ Արթնսուր մեր սկայարանքները, որբեսի քու ճանապարհիդ առաջնորդող նշանները տեսնենք։ Ով Աստված, մեզ մղե, որբեսի քու արդարությունդ եւ ճշմարիտ խաղաղությունդ փնտրենք։
Ya Allah yang adil, Engkau memelihara kami dalam segala situasi. Engkau memberikan kami pengharapan untuk terus hidup dan berkarya dalam dunia yang Kau tempatkan bagi kami. Ajarilah kami untuk meneruskan hikmat, kebaikan, dan cinta-Mu dalam dunia ini, supaya setiap suara dapat didengarkan dan semua ratapan dapat terungkapkan. Mampukan kami untuk memperjuangkan keadilan, supaya semua orang memperoleh apa yang menjadi haknya. Penuhi kami dengan Roh Kudus-Mu, supaya kami dapat mewujudkan dan menegakkan harkat dan martabat semua orang di segala tempat. Ya Allah, tuntunlah kami untuk selalu mencari kebenaran dan memperjuangkan kedamaian. Amin.
God's good gift of creation contains enough for all to thrive. In gratitude for the part that has come into our personal stewardship, and in order that what God has made for all might be shared more equitably with all, we make an offering of thanksgiving when we gather for worship. As part of our prayer of thanksgiving, Ecumenical Advocacy Days collects an annual offering to further work being done in accord with our theme. This year, 2 organizations committed to human rights and civil rights will benefit. This year's recipients are Black Voters Matter Capacity Building Institute and International Coalition for Human Rights in the Philippines. You are invited to give a gift at advocacydays.org/offering.
Black Voters Matter Capacity Building Institute is dedicated to increasing power in marginalized, predominantly Black communities. The organization believes that effective civic engagement includes understanding, respecting, and supporting local infrastructure. Black voters matter not only on Election Day, but everywhere, including rural counties and smaller cities and towns that are often ignored by candidates, elected officials, political parties, and the media. The leadership, talent, and commitment demonstrated by Black women in particular must receive recognition and, more importantly, investment in order to flourish and multiply.
God of justice, love, and mercy, pour your wisdom on our souls. by your all-sustaining power. Keep our spirits strong and bold. Lift our eyes to see your vision of a world in urgent need. Grant us courage then to follow, bringing comfort with each day. Oh, yeah, yeah.
God of justice, love and mercy, with compassion let us care as we come in humble weakness. May your strength be yours to share.
Press our hearts to know the struggle of the ones we cannot see. Brothers, sisters, all who suffer, may your kindness set us free. Oh, God of justice, love and mercy, send us out and make us bold as we strive for your high calling. Let our hands your mercies hold. You have blessed us with abundance, gifts to share with those in need. Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, you have blessed us, you have blessed us with abundance, share with those in need. Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, may we follow as you lead. Oh, thank you, Lord. May we follow as you lead.
Let's go to God in prayer and thanksgiving. All good gifts come from you, dear God, revealing glimpses of your grace. We are blessed both in receiving sufficiently that we will thrive, and in discerning when we are satisfied, when we have enough. We offer these gifts now, knowing that they come first from you. We depend upon you and your creation for all that we call ours. Bless these offerings, that they will be turned to your purposes and build a world that embodies and loves your justice and mercy. Amen.
We have gathered and prayed together in the one Holy Spirit. We now dedicate ourselves to the task for which we were called, to listen and to speak. Turn your mind to the words yet to come. Hear about the gap between a system that honors the informed vote of every U.S. citizen and the reality we inhabit today. Grow in understanding how the complex web of U.S. military sales is used to deny human rights around the globe. Having listened and learned, then turn your heart to God's work, advocating for just policies that secure rights and affirm dignity in every place. God bless you.
strength.